The Apple II was all the revenues of the company, for the first 10 years. This is rather something that was being left out deliberately, acting like all we are Macintosh. We had to earn our way there. So and I was speaking up not for myself, my own feelings, because I wouldn't do that. I was speaking up for all the people around me in the Apple II division that just came back from that shareholders meeting so upset and ready to quit and just disgusted with how little respect they were getting. And Steve called them bozos. That's why he put us in a building way away from the main campus.
A triangle building.
Just because he felt we were worthless and nothing.
Off on Bub Road or somewhere?
No, triangle building.
It was on Lawrence and 280.
Oh, that was way out. Yeah.
And so I was doing it on the behalf of other people. They didn't have a voice like I had. They couldn't call John Scully and get him shaking in his chair, and I could, and I did it for them. And but I was leaving the company for other reasons. Well, the Wall Street Journal said I was leaving Apple because I didn't like what Apple was doing, and that was not the truth. But it's history. It's in all the books that way. So that's what the movie was, sort of had me saying that. I never had a meeting with Steve Jobs. I never went with him and told him I'm leaving, or anything like that, or it's not the same. No.
All right, we've got to pause here for like a minute and a half. When we come back, we're going to talk about the coup and Steve Jobs leaving the company. So don't go away. I was told I shouldn't say don't go away, because that gives people the idea that they could go away. I hadn't thought of going away. Maybe I will.
I want you to stay. Wow. Well, having all this stuff on the page does make it easy to have things to talk about.
Wait a minute. Apple reveals Macintosh in commercials at sales event in Hawaii. No, it was in Cupertino.
Oh yeah,
Hawaii was the Lemmings one. That was later. That was a later year.
There was a meeting in Hawaii, but they conflated that with the introduction.
No, but I went to the one in Hawaii, but it was a year later.
There was a sales meeting in Hawaii.
Yeah, a year later.
No, that was in... It was where they
shareholder meeting.
Well, I attended it. They showed the Lemmings commercial before it had been on TV.
Yeah.
Another cherry Coke?
No.
They did that every year.
No, I'm fine.
I haven't touched my water if you would ever get thirsty.
Okay, well, there could have been two in Hawaii.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, they had the sales meeting in Hawaii in October every year, and then the introduction in January.
Okay, I didn't go to that one because I guess I was in Cupertino or something.
We have some tweets in, so we'll answer some tweets when we come back. Do we have any messages?
Okay.
San Jose Sharks? No.
Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to click like and subscribe button. Turn on the bell for get notification when video uploaded. Thank you for your attention.
And we're back! And I'm going to take your tweets now. So earlier I told you if you tweet me, I will answer your questions, or have them answer your questions. Did Steve get fired? No, did Steve getting fired motivate him to learn to be a CEO? So Steve Jobs got fired.
Well, first of all,
Who knows the answer?
Steve didn't really get fired.
Right?
He didn't. He had to step down as general manager of the Macintosh division, but they didn't want him fired. He was still chairman of the board.
He could have started any computer project he wanted and had it
so
funded with millions.
So Steve didn't get fired, but Steve certainly wanted to prove himself when he did.
Was he chairman of the board?
And so the whole purpose of Next really was to prove to the world that he could
create a
surpass
computer.
Apple, create the best computer ever. And
Gordon Garb states that Bill Atkinson is an accomplished photographer. So that's what he's doing now.
We should plug his app. He has an app for the iPhone called PhotoCard. That's really fantastic.
I heard PhotoCard is a great application. If you're interested in it, you can get it at the App Store. We have to phrase it very carefully for public access TV.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. Public access.
Gordon Garb asks, when did Elmer Baum come on board? I don't know who that is.
Well,
From the
Alan
beginning.
Baum, the Baums had been friends of mine my whole life, and I introduced Steve very early on to Alan Baum, who was the only person I went to high school with that also was into computers and design and the insides of them. And Alan took us down to Hewlett-Packard where he worked and showed us early computer games, text-based games like Star Trek and Wampus and And so the balance were kind of close to us in that sense. Alan declined a very early offer to join Apple, but his father, Elmer Baum, loved his father. His father was one of those guys that had a sense of humor and laughed when the kids did misbehavior. And oh my gosh, I loved that guy so much. He was a big influence on my life. And Elmer came to work for Apple. Just he was beloved by everyone.
And he was about
everyone around
20 years older than the next oldest.
He was already
employee.
retired.
Yeah, and he came and he was a technician,
But-
always testing
No, and
equipment.
he also lent you guys $5,000 to build those first PC boards as well, as I recall.
No, this must go back to something else.
No, I heard that too.
Yeah,
I heard that.
Because we built the PC parts with our own money.
Well,
Well, it
for the
could be.
next
It could
run
be.
after that or something like
Yeah, it
that.
could be.
Supposedly, Alan told me that his
Yes.
dad lent $5,000.
I heard
and,
that too.
And Steve paid him back the $5,000,
Yeah.
but nothing else. No interest, no stock. No.
So next we have a question. When is the Woz movie coming out? And I
Good
I understand
question.
it's part of the movie that Aaron Sorkin's doing.
It's not
You
a
know-
Woz
I think
movie.
we're
Yeah,
out
it's
of
not the
we're out of
Woz
place. No. That's the no. It's a movie about Steve Jobs based on Sony purchased the rights to the official
Walter
biography.
Isaacson, they're Walter Isaacson.
Yeah.
But did
Yeah.
anyone try to buy your book rights? You would think with all that,
People
someone
have
might
suggested it, but no, not yet.
Yeah.
I'm not out there trying to sell it.
I wouldn't be surprised. I got offers for my book, but they weren't real legitimate.
I will appear in your movie if they make one. Okay, so let's get back to the show.
Well,
we left off.
We were talking about Elmer Baum. So because Elmer was an old radio and an analog guy, and his job was testing and tweaking the power supplies. And he sat right next to me when I started. I was doing the logic boards and he was doing the power supplies. And super helpful guy.
And we kept him for years and years and years, the longest time of any employee. And he was the oldest Apple employee we said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so when we last left off, you had resigned, and now Jobs is about to get sidelined. And so he's planning a coup when Scully is supposed to go to China. And so he has all these guys at his house who are like playing this coup. And then Mike Markula comes and tells him, at this party that I'm behind you. But then at the board meeting, he turns on him. Well, Steve perceives him as turning on him.
Yeah, and that's the basic outlines of that is true, but they had the wrong people. There was a different set of leadership in the Mac team at the time. I had already left, and but it was like a whole different set of people than they had in the movie. They didn't want to introduce those new characters. And then Markula never told, and at least in real life, he never promised to support Steve and told him otherwise. He told Steve the opposite. He told him he wasn't going to support him when he came to his house.
So the movie shows...
Why did the movie take all these little, privileges and directions, always in the same
It
direction?
would take 20 years to do a movie that spanned 20 years of Apple, I guess. Okay, so there's a board meeting. Everyone votes for Scully over Jobs. Now, my friend Scott Canaster is here tonight. He's famous for writing all the books that all the engineers read to learn how to write the Macintosh software. Now, he's LinkedIn friends with Del Yoakum, who was on the board. And Scott tells me that Del told the story that at this meeting, he says, "I love you, Steve, but I respect you, John."
Ooh.
So that was an interesting quote, I thought.
Yeah, I never thought Dell was the most competent. It was okay.
Except Dell ran the division that made the
Yeah,
money.
the Apple II. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
Oh,
So
okay.
competence
Yeah,
depends what you want to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so then they had a montage in the movie where, Steve leaves Apple. Then years later, Scully is thrown out of Apple. And then they hire Gil Amelio. And then they showed
Well,
that
there was a Mike Spindler
Yeah.
there's a Spindler in between with the
Yeah,
gloss
and
over.
Mark, yeah, somewhere, I don't know.
And then they next buys Apple.
Next buys Apple.
Or vice versa.
That's actually a
so-
fair description of what happened. It's
Internal to Apple, we called it the reverse takeover of Apple by Next.
Right.
Because Apple paid money to Next to buy them,
400 million.
427 million, and then all the executives at Apple were taken out and sidelined and replaced with all the Next executives. So like Avi Tevanian was from Next,
He was already there.
Rubinstein.
Well, no, he came with Next, right? He came
right?
with Next.
And then
And
Rubinstein,
John Rubinstein.
John Rubinstein came from Next. So like, and all
A lot of the top ones, but not
Did
all
Rick
through
Page
them.
come back to Apple?
Who?
Did Rick Page come back to Apple
don't know.
after
Don't
Next?
remember.
Yeah, I don't think he did. He didn't. A lot of the original Next was doing very
But,
badly.
you know, I
before
talked
that,
to
and
Mike
a lot of the
Markla
founding
about
team
that
left.
when, you know, the day that Guild called me and said we were going to buy Next for 400 million. And then Mike Markla dropped by my office and said, how you feel about it? And I wasn't for it. I said, we don't need to spend $400 million for an operating system. I told Steve Jobs the same thing, and he agreed. and Mike Markla said, yeah, that's true, but we are in bad shape with ideas and products, and we need people. And Next has a lot of great talented engineers and designers, and that's really what we're buying.
people were leaving Apple a lot in those days.
Well, the people that were left weren't considered super innovators. They could crank the machine around and have the new machine every year, like you tend to get into
and
a habit
they
of
had
doing.
a new operating system under development that fell flat. It just failed. It was
It was
not
kind of too hard a
shippable.
task, and the reason it was too hard a task was
was
because of
called Copeland.
flaws in the original Macintosh operating system that weren't really designed for the world that would have networking.
Yes, yes.
That Steve would talk about how he missed that when he went to Xerox PARC, the importance of networking. So it was really his lack of vision that hurt Macintosh quite a bit at that point in time. So really what we, so we were in kind of dire straits. But we didn't need a new operating system because our operating system was actually okay. And people were saying your Macs are crashing 3 times a day. They're crashing all over the place,
Yes.
every single day. But it wasn't the operating system. It was Internet Explorer. Everyone had switched to Internet Explorer. No, it was. It didn't crash in Internet Explorer. It crashed
Yes,
in the
yes,
Finder.
yes, yes.
It crashed in other programs.
Yes.
And I discovered it by accident. I couldn't get very many people in Apple to listen to me. And the way I discovered it was my son switched to some weird little lightweight browser from Germany called iCab one day. I thought, whatever Jesse does, I want to do. He's follow the kids. And so I switched to iCab, and my Mac didn't crash the first day. My Duo didn't crash. By night, I was mind-boggled. It didn't crash the next day. It would go for weeks without crashing. And you know, everybody who said Macs crash all the time on the forums were running servers in those days. They were all running servers. The big, heavy Mac users, the servers never crashed. They were running Macintosh. They never ran Internet Explorer.
Wow.
That was the difference. And I went on my forums and I put out this little word, and it turns out the few people that we didn't believe who said they never crashed were using Netscape. I went to 2 of my friends. One is a deaf technician and one was a financial guy, Marty Spurgell. They said they never crashed. Both of them were using Netscape.
Wow.
It was
There
that
you go.
simple a formula, but we're past that because at least the operating system allowed Internet Explorer to do it. I'd love to go back and run some test software, debugging software, and find out if Internet Explorer had something deliberate inside to make Macs crash-worthy.
Wow.
All right, so the movie shows Jobs at home now with Lisa, who is the daughter he denied having for a long time. Now she's staying for some amount of time at his house. And he's there with his wife, Laureen, and his son, Reed. And I think the scene was probably put there to show Steve Jobs is now grown up, and he's not the same guy he was before. And he seems a lot calmer. And so at this point, Gil Emilio is trying to convince Jobs to come to Apple as part of the purchase as an advisor or something, just to help him out. And Steve's hemming and hawing. Now I remember at the Macworld keynote, 1997, they announced the deal, and they brought you on stage too. And they're saying both Steves are coming back to Apple. And that was the last time I saw you at Apple.
I don't think they said such a thing, but yeah, I talked to Steve a bit during that show about different things, yeah.
So did you do anything for Apple past that point?
No, it was never my intent to come back into Apple like an engineer. The way I had been once before, that was too intense a life, and by now my just being open to the public, the press, and all that, my life didn't have enough time to do that kind of engineering I'd done once.
Did Apple recall
And I
you
didn't
asking
want to
for
just
help?
be a think up ideas person. What?
Advice? Did Apple recall you for advice? Not necessarily engineering, but what should we do?
No.
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 Yeah.
You know, I think, yeah, I think Steve really, I think he liked being in control to prove himself after his earlier times at Apple. And I think he wanted that alone, you know, bask in the sunlight. But he was always very respectful and very nice to me.
So Steve Jobs comes back to Apple, and they show him in the lobby of Apple walking around. And now I know they can't use actual locations in the movie, but they chose a horrible place to choose the lobby of Apple. It's like some kind of shopping mall or something it looked like. It wasn't at all like what the Apple lobby looks like. But they did have a helicopter fly over the campus, and you could see the real campus. And you could see the cafeteria being renovated. The day they chose to fly over was like the 3 months they were renovating the cafeteria.
Wow.
But yeah, horrible facsimile for the lobby. And they show him walking around, you know, Apple poking his head in. And Keith Statenfield, who's on the crew tonight, he told me this funny story, is that he'd be like in a meeting, planning out Mac OS 8 things or something, and Steve Jobs would just pop into random meetings. He'd just walk into a meeting and say, "Hey, you guys, what are you all talking about?" Maybe not so Texan. And and so they would
Not Texan at all.
not Texan at all. And so people would say, "Oh, we're talking about this thing we're thinking about for Mac OS 8." And then Steve would talk for a while, say, "Oh, here's what I think you should do. You should do it this way, and this way." And then he'd leave and everybody would be like, you know, stunned. And then I guess a few days or weeks later, half the people didn't work there anymore. Is that?
It was that time.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Yeah, so Steve would walk around and...
Steve was like that in the very early days.
Yeah.
If he was scheduled to come to a meeting, he wouldn't show up. But he'd pop into meetings both he was scheduled to and not all the time. And then sometimes only stay for minutes.
My manager at work's like that too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have him meeting Jonathan Ive. Steve, you know, walks around and he bumps into Jonathan Ive. And he asks him, like, "Why are you here? Like, this company's a sinking ship. Why are you still here?" Sort of thing. And he says, and Jonathan Ive says, "Oh, I have hope. I still believe in what you built." You know, who knows if that's true, because we don't have Jonathan Ive here. Jobs sells all his shares, and the stock drops 7.5% overnight. So he sells like 1.5 million shares because they think he's losing faith. This is still when Gil Milo's in charge.
Those are the shares he got for the purchase of Next. And he went through an agonizing period where he talked to a lot of different people, including me, about could Apple be saved? This was before he had come back, so maybe the timing's a little off. But before he decided to take it over, he didn't want to take it over if it was just going to tank, obviously.
Right.
So he had a lot of indecision. So he talked to a lot of people, and then finally made his decision. It was going to fail. He couldn't take it over, and he sold all that stock, even though he had promised not to.
At an all-time low.
He sold everything. Yeah.
Pretty
Well,
much.
you know, twice when Steve twice managed to sell all of his Apple stock except for one share at the all-time low. He hit the all-time low within a few dollars. He did that in
That's when you lose
1985
faith, right?
after he got fired the first time. He sold all of it, and he almost hit the exact low, and then he did it again in 1997.
I remember Avi Tavanian also told us that story at a communications meeting. He said, "Don't count Apple out, because it always goes back."
Yeah.
Then it shows Ed Woolard and Mike Markula trying to convince Steve Jobs to become CEO. So they're kind of tired with Gil Milio, and they want Steve to step up. And he's reluctant. Now the movie portrays Steve as kind of agreeing to it. When they throw out Gil, he kind of agrees to take over. A lot of people forget that when Gil left Apple, Fred Anderson, the CFO, became CEO for 2-3 months, maybe more.
Steve felt that of everyone on Gil's staff, Fred Anderson was the only one worth salt.
He was the only one who actually stuck around after Gil, and then Fred took the fall for Steve in the options episode. Okay, so we see pictures of Ives designing the iMac around this time. So it was in like 1997, which is about right, I guess. 'Cause I think the iMac came out in 98.
That's right, May 1998.
May 98, yeah. So we see Gil, saying to the board, well, Steve Jobs has been really helpful around here, and I think now it's time. We've transitioned. We don't really need him around as an advisor anymore. And I like this part where the board says, yes, we agree he's not an advisor anymore.
Right.
And then, Steve gives all his ideas, like he's taking control. And then they have a quick vote, and they vote for Jobs, and they throw out Gil Milio. But that's not it.
Well, and Steve never really accepted the full CEO of Apple until he had him recovered
for years
in 2000.
Yeah. So he was always adamant.
He called him ICEO.
ICEO.
Interim CEO.
Yeah, he was adamant not to be CEO for a while until it was clear Apple had a future going forward. So then the board votes for Jobs, and then he slowly kicks off all the members of the board he didn't like, which is, I think, most of them. I think only 2 survived.
Yeah.
So like Mike Markula, who started.
And he brought in.
No, Markula had to leave.
Yeah, he brought in a bunch of new board members, including Larry Ellison. There's a really funny story about that, which is Larry Ellison agreed to be on Apple's board because he was friends with Steve, but he never came to any of the board meetings until finally Steve had a big life-size picture of Larry Ellison that he put in the seat for the meeting.
Cardboard cutout.
That's funny.
And there was a plan at one point for Steve and Larry to buy Apple.
Yes.
Do like a.
That was before, though, before Steve came back.
Okay.
He told that story. Larry Ellison told that story at Steve's memorial service about him. He had a really funny story about he was trying to convince Steve to let him fund buying Apple so Steve could run it, and Steve didn't want to. He said he didn't want to do it until Apple asked him to come back because. He wants to be on the higher moral ground. And Larry Ellison said, that higher moral ground, that's expensive real estate.
And the movie ends with Jobs recording the Think Different ad. So he's doing a voiceover and he does, here's to the crazy ones, square pegs, square holes, round pegs, etc. We're crazy. We make stuff happen. Anyways, you guys all know the commercial. Now, in the commercial we saw on TV, it was Richard Dreyfuss doing the voiceover. But Steve Jobs had recorded it originally. And near the time of his death, it popped up. And I think it was on YouTube. And we could all hear Steve Jobs say that speech, and it sounded really powerful.
Steve cared so much about that commercial.
And you could hear it in the voice. Like, you'd think he could have used his voice in that commercial without Richard Dreyfuss, and it'd be, amazing. But hearing it later at his memorial at Apple, it really brought tears to everybody's eyes, because they played it then too, and it was quite incredible. Okay, so we're going to take a final break, and then we'll read your questions.
Okay, we don't have long for the break.
Why is that?
Because it's 9:19 and we got to switch tapes and people got to leave.
Yeah.
That's not Mac Hack, for God's sakes.
Mac Hack.
Well, except in Michigan, it would have been closer.
Let's see if any more tweets. People are following me. Let's see if you get motivate him.
A lot of good
You
stories.
got to find some really good
Can we make up something good?
questions.
Someone make up a
Don't
question.
Don't make up.
Anybody here got a question?
Pirates? Compared to pirates?
Pirates.
Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Okay,
Sure.
save that. We'll ask that later.
Different movie.
All right.
Yes, I know that.
I'm going to check the messages from the website.
iOS 7 and what was Steve's thought?
Okay, are you ready in there?
John, be rude. Ask him about Google.
Ask what about Google?
Nobody cares about Google. Okay, ready in the booth? Ready in the set? John, ready?
Yes, I am as ready as I'm going to be, I think.
5, 4.
And we are back. And we went through the whole movie, and it was mostly wrong. We had a question from the audience. That guy. He asked, how would you compare this movie to the Pirates of Silicon Valley movie, the one with Noah Wyle on TNT a few years back?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I got to where I don't want to read Apple books and watch Apple movies, and I had an advanced copy of Pirates of Silicon Valley. I think came from Andy.
And I got mine from Dad.
And my wife wanted to see it at the time, so I put it on the VCR, and it caught my attention from the first scene. And then there I was with a blue box in the tear gas from the cops at Berkeley, and I said, "My God, that's how it was." I just perked up, and that was an interesting, from the start to the end. You were trying to follow stories, and where does it go next? And it was suspenseful, and I like suspense. And I didn't get that way on this movie. It's just like, okay, I'm seeing more of a story, sort of, that is parts that are known, parts that are very wrong. Now, you can't go back and take a scene that occurred in the past and sit a bunch of people you don't know and they've never been in the press and get their personalities right, get the words they would say right, get the relations right. But each scene in Silicon Valley sort of was a theme of the correct meaning of what a progression of our industry as it developed, and it was an interesting story. People want to see that American dream. How did these companies, Microsoft, Apple, where did they come from? They want to hear that story more than I think they want to see what was Steve Jobs like and his mannerisms and all that. So I basically was kind of bored and didn't get, emotionally, really into it like Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Pirates was like a more dramatization of two companies, Microsoft and Apple, at the dawn of the computer age coming together. Whereas this movie was just, one guy.
But it had kind of conflicts and little resolutions and what's next and steps.
I love
steps
Pirates
along
of
the way.
Silicon Valley, and I love the ending of it. Was the best part, I felt, by far, where Steve Jobs and Bill Gates had copied the Macintosh with Windows, and Steve says to him, finally goes, "Well, ours is better. We're still better." And Bill Gates looks at him and goes, "You don't get it, Steve. That doesn't matter."
although Steve learned a lot about keeping things secret from Microsoft and others.
In both movies, Steve Jobs yelled at Bill Gates for stealing the Macintosh.
Right.
And I remember at the end of the movie, too, I think they ended it with the Macworld 98, I guess, where they made the deal with Microsoft. And you had Bill Gates on the huge screen behind him. And everyone saw that and thought, hey, that looks a lot like the guy in the 1984 ad.
Yeah.
So the enemy wasn't IBM after all. So that's all I got.
Well, my comment is, okay, so Noah Wiley, awesome job as Steve Jobs, right? Michael Anthony Hall playing you was...
No, he played Bill Gates.
Joey Slotkin.
No. Michael Anthony Hall
played Bill Gates.
Oh, I remember that. Oh, I see. Well, okay, but he didn't capture your brilliance and your humor, right? That was my biggest complaint. And that's my complaint about the Jobs film also, is that Josh Gad, although...
He read my book 3 times, he told me. He wanted to put in, he told me different scenes he wanted to put in, but they didn't let him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I liked him when I met him in person.
Oh, yeah?
I want to meet him.
Yeah. Anyway, he did not, that was Bill Atkinson's big complaint, is that he didn't capture your sense of humor and playfulness.
But the answer is it's a movie about Jobs. That's fine.
That's right. So we look forward to a movie about you.
That's fine. But when you portray me as being Beatles.
And the difference between those two movies, they both had good performances. Like Ashton Kutcher did a good job with Steve's mannerisms and stuff. Noah Wiley did a great job, but the difference is it was in the screenplay, the script. I don't even know the guy who did Pirates of Silicon Valley, but that was a good script. It actually had good conflict. It had the deeper meaning was true for things. Whereas the Jobs movie, the guy who here's something Dan told me that kind of explains it, which is the screenwriter was a first-time screenwriter, never written a screenplay before. Well, how did he get the job to write that movie? His dad put up all the money for the movie. His dad was the producer, and I
wanted to see Steve trading off thinking with other people, trying to come to conclusions of what we should do and why. I wanted to see that kind of brilliance. And
the guy didn't really. I met him because Rod Holt had that screening, and the screenwriter was there, and he talked about
Matt Whiteley.
things, but he just had a superficial understanding, but in particular, he didn't know how to write a screenplay. Really, it was just a laundry list of incidents as opposed to things that would show a deeper meaning. That's why the movie was so flawed.
It did
But
get
even,
better.
Even the incident with Johnny Ives was kind of like seemed so made up and artificial and phony, and you want the real. You want more realism.
I think it's worth just, in making that film, it was a huge choice of where to start it and where to end it and what to leave out. And they completely left out Pixar. They completely left out Next. And some of the reviewers criticized it for the chosen arc of the story. I don't have an opinion
for the
myself.
time frame of the story, which is mostly up until Steve left.
Right.
He was a different person than the one they portrayed was the later Steve Jobs more. The leader and conveyor of knowledge to everyone. He was very much, also learning from everyone in the earlier times and, hoping to be there. But he wasn't the able to produce the big winning products that we love so much until later.
Right, so they portrayed him as being the God we know him today all along, but really not until later. At least he'd like that.
Well, so here's my last comment is, it's just, I know because I was working with the filmmakers, they really did try very hard to get the history right. And I wrote them many, many comments of stuff that was obviously wrong. There were a lot of things I didn't know, but it's just impossible, really. It's an impossible task. What I thought was that the movie did a pretty good job of getting the emotional notes right. That's what I say, anyway. It got the highs and the lows. Although your comment about it not showing Steve's thought process in being charismatic and hiring people, right?
I wanted to see the way he really thought and the words that he would have used to make a trade-off in a product feature or something. A back and forthness. I would have wanted that.
That is hard to do.
But I didn't get the emotions of, oh my gosh, I love him, I hate him. It was kind of like neutral throughout.
Yeah.
I laughed 3 times, the Polish jokes and the real funny one when he said Woz is carrying his own weight. I laughed. I wasn't heavy back then, but
all right.
It was funny.
We're out of time, so I got to thank you guys so much for being on the show. This was a great show. Thanks for coming out the way and telling all your stories. And we finally, got some real perspective on how things went. So thanks, Andy and Daniel and Steve. And
thank you, John.
Thanks for watching. And we're going to roll credits. And while we roll credits, we're going to do a high five and then freeze frame. That's how we end the show.
Trademark.
Are you ready?
We all do our own high five?
All at once?
Okay.
Oh, Isaac, you're supposed to hold our hands up. Or we're waving.
The credits are going to go for a while.
I don't see the credits moving.
Wait, there should be more credits. I think it's stuck.
Uh-oh.
Should be the credit. Where's you guys there? Yeah, there you go.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
What do I got, guys? More credits. You need to speed up the credits. Credits should be faster.
So the show could not have been live. Because he only has a half-hour slot. I see. That's why I was so surprised.
No, I'm going to...
So YouTube could have it all. Eventually.
We need some promotional photos after this, so don't go away.
Company, girls, have yourself an we play games of love to avoid the depression.